We are told that power comes from scale, from factories that stretch beyond the horizon, from crops planted in perfect rows, from patents filed and sealed in climate-controlled vaults. We are told that nourishment must be processed, refined, standardized until it forgets its origin, that medicine must arrive in sterile bottles with printed dosage, that protein must come wrapped in plastic and measured in grams, that oil must be pressed by machines large enough to hum like distant thunder. And so we overlook the small, the plant that grows behind fences, along forgotten paths, in soil no one bothers to improve. It is dismissed as common, as weed, as relic of a slower world. Yet for centuries it provided oil, protein, and medicine from a single stem. It asked for little. It gave without contract. It returned each year without permission. It could not be easily controlled. It scattered its own seeds. It adapted to poor soil. It resisted uniformity. And what cannot be standardized rarely survives industrial logic. This is the story of a backyard plant that fed families, healed wounds, lit lamps, strengthened soil, and why industry chose to ignore it. Here, in ancient food files, we gather what was not meant to vanish, not curiosities for display, not romantic fragments of a simpler past, but systems that sustained ordinary lives, quiet architectures of survival. We preserve them not out of nostalgia, but because they functioned. If this archive matters to you, remain with it, not for growth, for continuity. Tonight, we open a record rooted in dark soil and small yellow flowers. We turn to a plant that grew close to kitchens, not kingdoms. A plant once known in every village across Europe, North Africa, and Asia. Mustard. Long before it became a bright stripe in a glass bottle, mustard was a field companion. Wild species of Sinapis and Brassica flourished along disturbed ground in the Mediterranean basin. In what is now southeastern Turkey and northern Syria, archaeologists have uncovered mustard seeds in Neolithic sites dating back more than 5,000 years. Small, hard, dark as dried blood. They were not decorative, they were stored. In ancient India, mustard was known as sarsan, or sarsapa in Sanskrit texts. It appears in early Ayurvedic writings not as condiment, but as force. Warming, stimulating, a seed that stirred stagnant blood and cleared the lungs of winter damp. In the villages of northern Europe, mustard grew in narrow strips behind cottages, its yellow flowers rising above cabbage heads and onions, its scent sharp when crushed between fingers. Children were warned not to grind too much at once. The vapors burned the eyes, made the nose run. It was understood that heat lived inside those seeds. In the Hebrew Bible, mustard appears as symbol, a small seed that grows into something larger than expected. But the metaphor only existed because the plant was known intimately. People had watched it rise from near invisibility into a tall, branching form buzzing with insects. They had seen how quickly it moved through a season. In early spring, it germinated fast, racing ahead of slower crops. In poor soil, it did not complain. In compacted earth, its taproot pressed downward, loosening what was hard. It thrived where the land had been disturbed, after flood, after fire, after plow. Where other crops hesitated, mustard entered. Its leaves, when young, were edible, peppery, green with a brightness that cut through heavy winter meals. Its seeds were more enduring. They could be dried and stored for years without losing vitality. Ground into paste with vinegar or wine, pressed for oil, steeped in alcohol, crushed into poultice. The plant was not specialized, it was complete. Biologically, mustard belongs to the Brassicaceae family. It shares lineage with cabbage, turnip, and broccoli. But unlike its heavily domesticated relatives, many mustard species remained close to wild resilience. Its seeds contain significant oil. In traditional varieties such as Brassica gentiana and Brassica nigra, oil can account for 30 to 40% of the seed's weight. In regions where olives would not grow and sesame faltered, mustard offered alternative. The oil burned in clay lamps. It flavored lentils and fish. It preserved vegetables in jars long before refrigeration. After pressing, the remaining seed cake was not discarded. It was protein, fed to animals, mixed into fodder, sometimes added to coarse breads in lean years. Nothing was wasted. Inside the seed lay chemical defense, glucosinolates, inert until crushed. When seed met water and cell walls were broken, enzymes converted these compounds into isothiocyanates, sharp, volatile, capable of stinging the skin and clearing the chest. A mustard plaster placed on the sternum drew blood to the surface, warmed cold limbs, relieved stiffness in joints stiffened by damp weather. Monastic herbals of medieval Europe recorded its use. Physicians of the Islamic Golden Age referenced its heating nature. In rural India, mustard oil was massaged into newborn skin, believed to strengthen bone and ward off chill. These were not superstitions floating without anchor. They were observations repeated across centuries. Mustard slowed rot and pickling brine. It reduced infection in small cuts. It stimulated appetite when illness dulled the tongue. Its leaves provided micronutrients in late winter when few greens survived frost. It matured in weeks, not months. In a world without cold storage, speed mattered. Mustard answered quickly. During the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 in northern Europe, relentless rains destroyed grain harvests. Chroniclers wrote of swollen rivers and rotting wheat. Households turned to hardy greens and stored seeds. Mustard leaves appeared in pottages. Seeds extended flavor across thin broths. It did not replace grain. It did not end hunger, but it softened absence. In 17th century France, prepared mustard paste gained reputation in Dijon, yet the seed was grown nearby, in Burgundy fields, pressed in small mills. It remained local. In Russia, especially along the Volga region, mustard oil became a staple cooking fat where climate made olive cultivation impossible. Pressed in village operations, stored in clay vessels against winter. In Bengal, mustard oil defined cuisine. Fish shimmered in its pungency, lentils bloomed with its heat. The plant traveled with migration, carried in pockets, hidden in sacks, scattered along wagon trails in North America. Its adaptability was not spectacle, it was reliability. But as the 19th century progressed, agriculture began to consolidate. Oil became industrial, pressed not in village mills but in centralized factories powered by steam. Crops were selected for uniform maturation, for compatibility with mechanical harvest, for predictable output. Mustard did not lend itself easily to vast monocultures. Its seed pods shattered when overly dry. It matured unevenly. It refused strict synchronization. To industry, this was inefficiency. Mustard remained small, grown in pockets, in backyard plots. It was unmanageable, unownable, inconvenient, and so it was sidelined. Now the ground shifts again. Climate patterns destabilize. Drought deepens in regions once predictable. Soil erosion accelerates under continuous monoculture. Farmers search for rotation crops that regenerate rather than deplete. Mustard returns to planning documents, not as relic, as function. Agronomists observe how its deep roots penetrate compacted layers, how its biomass enriches soil, how compounds released from its tissues suppress certain pests. The plant that once warmed chests also cleanses fields. In nutrition science, renewed attention toward traditional fats opens space for reconsideration. Communities reestablish small-scale pressing operations, reducing dependency on distant supply chains. Mustard does not demand revival campaigns. It continues as it has for millennia, growing where soil is disturbed, offering leaf, seed, oil, protein in the press cake, heat in the crushed seed. It remains inconvenient to large systems, too adaptable, too integrated. For households seeking autonomy, it offers completeness in limited space. What was lost was not the plant. It still grows wild along roadsides and abandoned lots. What was lost was recognition. The understanding that one modest stem could offer oil for light, protein for feed, medicine for chest, leaf for nourishment. Mustard does not ask permission to return. Its seeds remain viable for years in dry storage, hard, dormant, patient. Then, with rain and disturbed soil, it germinates. The backyard plant remains, not triumphant, not obsolete, simply present. Ancient food files exist to hold these records, not as relic, as continuity. Because what cannot be owned is often allowed to fade, and what is allowed to fade can still return. Nature persists without permission, and when conditions shift again, as they always do, the small yellow flower will rise, quiet, inevitable.